right. Next up is a book called The Exes by Leonora Darlington. And really excited for this one also. I've cracked it, and it's really suspenseful, really propulsive, really provocative. I want to talk first about Maya Ziv, the editor. She's got an embarrassment of riches in terms of best-selling books on her list, which I hope we have right this time. But the first line of this book is incredible. Quote, "What they don't tell you about betrayal is that it eats you slowly. It makes a home where your good feelings live and begins to gnaw." True. Very true. Anyway, so um, let's get into this. Leonora Darlington is a London-based writer of Ghanaian heritage. She received a master's with distinction in creative writing from Brunel University. She's also an editor, specializing in commercial best-selling fiction, and the founder of Owned Voices, an organization that aims to demystify publishing for underrepresented writers, which, as we all know, is so important. The Exes is her debut. Maya Ziv is, and Maya, correct us if we're wrong, VP and editorial director of Dutton, where she acquires and edits commercial and literary fiction. Her list includes suspense, thrillers, book club fiction, and literary debut novels. She's worked with both debut and established authors, including international bestseller Riley Sager, Matthew Fitzsimmons, Nita Prose, and now debut author Leodora. Okay, now I'm going to ask Leodora and Maya to start their microphones, their cameras, and their engines, and take off.
Thank you so much, Lee. Hi, Leodora.
Hello.
So happy to be here. I want to start with how I came to the Exes, which is your wonderful UK editor, Joel Richardson, pinged me and said he just bought a really exciting thriller and that it might be coming my way. So I knew to clear the decks for the weekend. And I still remember the coffee shop I was sitting in when I gasped at the many twists here, how deeply I fell in love with the sister story and also your stylish writing, which reminded me of some of my favorites, like My Sister, the Serial Killer, and some of my favorite shows and movies like Promising Young Woman and I May Destroy You. So I knew I had to work on it. I'm so happy to be here with you. And I try to hold back from asking you about your role as editor and how you manage to do it all. So now's my time. I would love to hear about A, how the novel came to you, and B, how long it took you to write it amidst what's a very busy day job.
A good question. So I actually started with the title, and I don't think most people know this, but it was called To All the Boys I Killed Before. I love consumer media, and I know that letters are a device that are often used, whether it's times of historical or romance, but that's usually from a sentimental lens. And I was really interested in the idea of what letters from a place of desperation or fear might look like. So that's how To All the Boys I Killed Before was born. But the story changed quite a lot, or evolved, the longer I worked on it and the more I reflected on my own personal experiences and started folding that into the narrative. So it's quite different from what it was at first, pitch stage. I found myself thinking a lot more about what drives a woman to violence. So as you all know, Maya, but I'll tell the audience, in the opening, our protagonist, Natalie, is holding a knife. She's terrified that she's going to use it to hurt her husband, who is sobbing next door. She really doesn't want to, but she doesn't think she can stop herself from doing it. And the novel then goes back looking through windows in her life, her childhood, her past relationships, and this relationship in particular to figure out how we've got there. So it's a lot about how everyone should really go to therapy. I'm told from a twisty lens.
Well, it's a really good segue because I know you talked to therapists in researching this novel and got some peer review. So would love to hear more about that process.
Yes. So I have an aunt who's a psychotherapist and has been doing that for 25 years. So early on in the novel's life cycle, as it were, she was a good head to chat to just on the solid plot terms. Like, how much can you tell a therapist before they have to go to the police? Quite a lot, it turns out. Also fascinating to discover that you can be struck off the UK clinical psychotherapist register and still be a counsellor. But But on a personal level, I then went on to do some more research, talking to more therapists, reading more books. I've always had a bit of an interest in how trauma impacts people without going into too much detail. I remember there was a particular time in my life that was quite stressful. I was doing my writing masters, really fun. I was working a 12-hour-a-day job, which was quite high stress and just a bit of a trigger warning for anyone who has experienced familial violence. But for example, one day I found myself running into oncoming traffic to pull a teenage girl up the road who was trying to throw herself in front of a car because her dad had tried to murder her the night before. So it was quite a lot of stuff going on, and my mum was dying at the same time. And I remember at this time period, I'd walk around and find myself having these really weird blank memory spots. So I've been interested in how trauma and memory intersect for a very long time, and the research is fascinating. Trauma can impact your hand-eye coordination, which I didn't know was a thing. There's a real link between trauma and your ability to imagine. So for some people, it can trigger really overactive imaginations, but for some, it just totally kills it. And not everything could go into the book, but it was absolutely fascinating. Also interesting to hear how much work therapists have to do on themselves and really, really work through, and I mean deeply work through their own trauma in order to get qualified, because of course you can't bring your own stuff into the room, which some therapists still do. But this book was also looking a little bit about that interesting dynamic and the challenge there. So fascinating.
Right. Well, something I love about Natalie, our main character, so much is she believes she has this monster inside her. She has this string of dead exes behind her. She's not quite sure of what she's capable of doing. And I just think there is something actually very relatable to the idea of parts of ourselves we don't want to look at. So I know you work with a crime suspense for your job and read a lot of it. So I'm so curious what was most important to you in sitting down to write the novel and what was daunting.
Oof. I mean, I definitely found it quite daunting because I know how many incredible authors there are out there. I'm very lucky in getting to work with some of them, as you said. So I had to spend a lot of time trying to switch off the part of my brain that thought anyone might read it. Particularly my own authors who are so incredible. I've sent them a lot of editorial. I'm sure they could read the book and go, "You wouldn't let me get away with that." But once I was able to do that, it was a lot of fun. I've been writing quite nerdly and quite sad books myself since I was about 30. I just sort of sit away and tap away and reread them from time to time as my own little nerdy form of entertainment. So when I could relax into it, it was, a lot of creative fun.
Great. Well, I'm actually always curious by writers. Was it love of writing that got you into publishing, or was it love of reading?
Well, it's kind of chicken and egg, isn't it? I think it was the reading first. Like everyone who works in publishing, books have been a love of mine for a long time. But as part and parcel of that, I ended up doing a master's in creative writing. And because I think everyone who teaches creative writing is worried about what we can do with the degree, part of it was studying how writing is used in the workplace. And as part of that module, I ended up reading the Spread the Words Writing the Future report, which is an analysis of the representation in the British publishing industry, which, newsflash, not amazing. And particularly in the commercial fiction space. And I remember reading that and thinking, okay, great. Yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to step into publishing and diversify the voice, able to get into the industry. And actually, I sat down with an assistant last week or week before last. And it's shocking, but I remember her saying to me, "You're the only Black editor I've ever met," which is amazing. But that's sort of how I ended up coming into the editorial.
Well, and your novel has some of that too, of just looking at especially how women of color are more in danger, including.
For sure.
So you only recently told me the kind of unbelievable story of how the span of time it took you to write this book. You don't mind humoring me. I would love for you to tell everybody.
Yes. Oh, I'm quite deadline oriented, and I've been writing the novel in bits and starts. I'd had this idea, I loved it. I'd sit down, write 4,000 words, and I wouldn't touch it for 2 months. I'd write 5,000 words, I wouldn't touch it for another 3 months. So I scheduled a bunch of emails to go out to agents under a pseudonym, by the way, because I hadn't shown any of the material to anyone, and I work in the industry. And what if they thought it was terrible and they never wanted to swing anymore? I never. Oh wow, you just never know. But I then got glandular fever, which I think is more commonly known as mono, and to clarify, that can knock people out for like a year. So I didn't finish the book. And I forgot I scheduled these emails until about 3 hours after the emails had all gone out. But very luckily, within hours, a number of agents were like, "Oh, this is amazing. I want to read the full manuscript." And I had to go, I'm so sorry, that doesn't actually exist. And this was on a Friday. And I said, "I'll send you the half that I have on Monday." I didn't actually have half yet. I wrote 15,000 words over the weekend. And then once I 50,000 words over Christmas in 2 weeks. Wouldn't recommend it. It's not the done. It isn't how I advise my authors to write something, shall we say, but it was productive and I found it, an interesting
Well,
read.
it's hard to believe because the novel was very polished when it came to me. And so when did you reveal your identity to these agents? Because it was your real name on submission to editors.
So I think by the time I'd got an agent, the cat was out of the bag, but it was essentially after agents had said they wanted to meet me. And I was quite lucky. I think of all the agents I submitted to, only 2 passed. So I had 11, 12 agent offers. But at the point of having to show up, I had to say, "Hey, by the way, I know I'm meeting you tomorrow. It's me, Indonesia." But I waited until that final, "Hey, we'd love to meet you to discuss representation." Very lucky. Going out to editors, much scarier because I couldn't hide the pseudonym. But fortunately in the UK, Jonathan preempted it overnight, and in the US, you're all very speedy too. So thank you, Maya, for reading in the
They were from that novel. Well, we have a minute left, so I'm gonna throw a dense question at you, which is, if you could have listeners take one thing away from this novel, what would it be? And I would love you to also wrap into that answer the beautiful role family plays in this book.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I'd love people to know that it's entertaining for twists. It's going to make your jaw drop, yes. But I also want people to know that, beneath all the fun and beneath all the twists, there are some really important messages in there without it feeling worthy. And it's not just for women, not just for people of color, although those messages do speak to them in particular too. But for anyone who's ever felt a little bit broken, I think it's for you. So I hope people enjoy your read.
I love it so much. I can't wait for people to read it. Please drop me an email when you get to the twists. I want to know what you think. And Lee, thank you again. Such a pleasure to be here.
Well, same here. And the book is such a pleasure. And I love all the twists. Great title. And Maya, Leodora, thank you so much for a great conversation.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Lee.
Matt.
Thank you, Leodora.